announces major U.S. airstrikes against Houthi rebels in Yemen. Good afternoon. I'm John Scott, and this is the Fox Report. Lucas Tomlinson is at the White House for us with the latest on those strikes. Lucas.
John, these are the most significant airstrikes since President Trump returned to the White House, and the first time U.S. jets have struck these Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen since President Trump returned to the White House. U.S. officials say F-18 Super Hornets from the flight deck of the USS Harry S. Truman were the vanguard of the strikes, along with Air Force fighter jets and drones. President Trump announcing the strikes just a few minutes ago on his Truth Social, saying, quote, today I have ordered the United States military to launch decisive and powerful military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. They have waged an unrelenting campaign of piracy, violence, and terrorism against American and other ships, aircraft, and drones. Joe Biden's response was pathetically weak, so the unrestrained Houthis just kept going. And John, recall, it was just days after taking office, one of President Trump's first executive orders was redesignating the Houthis a foreign terrorist organization after the Biden administration removed them. The State Department made it official earlier this month, marking Houthi leaders ripe for assassination. The targets in today's strikes include air defense systems and missile and drone factories, and also include a strike against one of the Houthis' top missile officers. The Houthis are backed by Iran. Many consider them modern-day Barbary pirates. Since the October 7th massacre, they have launched over 100 attacks against commercial shipping. U.S. warships also came into the crosshairs of the Houthis dozens of times in recent years. The Houthis launched anti-ship ballistic missiles and crewed drones at the American warships. None were successful and all were shot down. And just a few days ago, Houthis leader said attacks would resume against shipping in the Red Sea, and including Israeli ships. Now, General Kurilla, the head of U.S. forces in the Middle East, has been itching to launch these strikes to reopen those vital shipping lanes and destroy Iran's proxy force in Yemen. Kurilla ordered Truman, the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier, back to the Red Sea late last month to be prepared to launch these strikes, and those Super Hornets, as you can see there. Last month, the Houthis launched surface-to-air missiles at an Air Force F-16 orbiting overhead, as well as an American Reaper drone. And John, it's not just in Yemen where U.S. forces have been engaged. Last night, President Trump announced the number 2 leader in ISIS had been killed in an American drone strike. We have some video footage, as you can see there. That happened in western Iraq yesterday. And John, these airstrikes against the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels were meant to send a message to Tehran as well to stop their support for the Houthi rebels. Of course, that's where these missiles and drones that the Houthis fire at commercial ships and U.S. warships come from. I'll also read a little more from President Trump's lengthy statement on Truth Social. He had a message to the Houthis. It says, quote, "Your time is up and your attacks must stop starting today. If they don't, hell will rain down upon you like never before. And to Iran, support for the Houthi terrorists must end immediately." And President Trump said he won't be nice about it, John.
You're a Navy veteran, Lucas. I know that during the Biden administration, the Navy said it was basically more engaged in seaborne operations than at any time since, I think, World War II. Do I have that right? And is this kind of intended to put an end to that kind of thing on the part of the Houthis?
That's right, John. Multiple times U.S. warships came under ballistic missile attack in the Red Sea and off the coast of Yemen in the Gulf of Aden. And just for context, that has never happened in world history. Ballistic missiles have never been launched at U.S. warships before. Thankfully, they were all shot down. But that was always a concern in the Pentagon. What if those missiles gets through? It was notable in President Biden, in his farewell address, he talked about U.S. forces not being engaged in combat. And if you looked at the Navy press release when the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower strike group returned from the Red Sea, they talked about hundreds of bombs being dropped against the Houthis, dozens of surface-to-air missiles from those Super Hornets shooting down those crewed drones that are flying overhead. There was also an issue of cost. These interceptor missiles launched from the guided missile destroyers and cruisers in the strike group, John, those missiles cost millions of dollars, shooting down what were, in essence, flying lawnmowers launched from the Houthis, very crude drones, just, $50,000 or so in cost. And the fact that these shipping lanes, vital shipping lanes that are needed for commerce, for the oil trade, have been essentially shut down since the October 7th massacre, commercial ships having to take that long journey around Africa, certainly adding to the cost. So certainly there's an economic message here with these strikes against the Houthis today. And by the way, John, these strikes could go on for a number of days. That's not immediately clear.
Right, because I read that one of the goals is to target their weapons storage facilities, which are reportedly deep underground. So they're going to be using those bunker busters and probably repeatedly to try to get to those warehouses that are essentially buried.
Right, and it's notable, John, those Super Hornets carry 2,000-pound JDAM satellite-guided bombs. Those are not bunker busters, so if you needed those, you probably have to call in something heavier, some B-52 bombers, perhaps a B-2 bombers. We saw that one time during the Biden administration, B-2s launching from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. But certainly this is a powerful message being sent. You know, you also have Tomahawk cruise missiles aboard those guided missile destroyers in the Truman Strike Group. We didn't hear about any Tomahawk strikes today, but certainly there's more firepower in the area if called upon.
A powerful message being sent not only to the Houthis, but as you say, to Iran as well, Lucas.
There's no question, John. President Trump recently sent a letter to the Ayatollah saying Iran needs to end its nuclear enrichment program, stop in this path toward what many in the intelligence community say is a path to a nuclear bomb. The Israelis have been itching to strike the Iranians so far. While the Trump administration has voiced its support for such an operation, President Trump has said he wants to end this diplomatically. That's why he sent that letter, but it was rejected from the Ayatollah. But the Iranians support these Houthi rebels, and so there's no question this is a message being sent to Tehran as well in Sana'a in Yemen.
All right, Lucas Tomlinson at the White House. If you get more information on these attacks against the Houthis in Yemen, get back to us. Thanks, Lucas.
Will do, John.
Let's bring in national security and military analyst Dr. Rebecca Grant. Dr. Grant, picking up where I left off with Lucas on that last question. Yes, the Houthis are the target, but it's just as much a message to the Ayatollahs in Tehran, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And all I can say about these strikes is finally, this situation in the Red Sea has dragged on just far, far, far too long. What I'm hoping is that we'll see a really consistent and sustained campaign against the main targets that the Houthis are using to attack shipping. And that should include everything from weapon storage to command and control and radar sites. And because Iran supplies and supports the Houthis, of course, backed by China, who has recently sent a ship with missile propellant ingredients over to Iran, so Iran will get this message as well. And great work here by the Harry S. Truman, Carrier Air Wing 1, and of course there'll be some land-based U.S. Air Force fighters participating too. It's great to see our joint forces in action. General Kirill is doing the right thing.
Why did we tolerate this? I mean, as I mentioned with Lucas, the U.S. Navy was in the most sustained combat campaign since World War II under the previous administration. Why did we put up with it?
That's right. They played zone defense and did a tremendous job knocking down drones, missiles, taking out unmanned surface vessels. And, John, we used a rotation of the end, 5 different aircraft carriers, starting with the Gerald Ford right after the October 7th attacks and coming up now to the Harry S. Truman. We've had an aircraft carrier in that region consistently since then. What I like is seeing us use the striking power. President Trump has been really smart to use the striking power of the U.S. aircraft carrier to really get after these Houthi rebels. Remember, that's an illegitimate regime. The UN doesn't recognize them. They've been there a long time, but they're now creating a level of chaos, and we can't afford to have shipping closed off and our forces pinned down. So it was time to take offensive action, and I'm really glad President Trump has done it.
The regime may be illegitimate, but there are about 35 million people or so in Yemen, and virtually all of them are under the control of the Houthis. So is this possibly the first stage of knocking that regime out of power?
Interesting question. I don't know if regime change is the goal here. I think we really want to see them take out military capability. That will be the primary job. I would not be surprised to see these strikes go on for a little bit. And then, again, this has really got to send that message to Iran to stop supplying. We want to take out the weapon storage areas, the radar sites. And Iran has a ship there that they use to help the Houthis target maritime traffic. We need to end all of that. And so I hope the Ayatollah is really going to reconsider his military support down there, and that we use our U.S. military forces in a way that makes a very strong statement that we're done. We're done with these attacks against international shipping. This cannot go on, no matter how much Yemeni Houthi military capability we have to blow up.
Yeah, the Houthis are already saying that 9 civilians have been killed in these attacks, 9 injured. That, according to the health ministry that the Houthis run. In a situation like this, you probably cannot avoid civilian casualties, but given the level of bombardment that is apparently underway, I'm surprised if that number is real, and we don't absolutely have a way to verify that, but I'm surprised there aren't more.
Avoiding civilian casualties is a big requirement. This is part of the reason for striking at night. And remember, every target selected goes through a collateral damage evaluation, particularly if it's a building that's close in among some civilian facilities. But the vast majority of these things are straight up legitimate military targets, active radar sites, active missile launch sites, et cetera. And I know that our planners in Central Command are being extremely careful to target military targets. That's what they want to hit. They don't want to waste ordnance either. We don't want to see collateral damage. They want to get after their target objectives and get that task done.
President Trump liked to point to the fact that during his first term there were no wars launched. But is this tantamount to launching a war against the Houthis?
Reminds me more of President Trump's first term campaign against ISIS, when in a pretty short amount of time he wiped out the rest of that caliphate. I think it would be great for the Houthis to meet the same fate of being militarily taken apart as a viable military operation. They're doing absolutely no good. They are terrorists, they are pirates, they are affecting world shipping, and they've launched strikes against Israel. And what a mistake they made to pop back up, trying to influence events in Gaza yet again. Now they're going to feel the full weight of U.S. military power with the aircraft carriers, our fighters. B-2 bomber wouldn't surprise me as well. And that's due to President Trump. You know, the new sheriff in town, we are doing a new policy, and this is it for the Houthis.
I kind of wonder if they're the equivalent of the last man standing. I mean, Iran has its proxy armies, Hezbollah and Hamas. Those have been decimated by the Israelis. Now they've got the Houthis are sort of the last big force left, aren't they? And you know, is Iran about to see a triumvirate of defeats, I guess, among its proxy forces?
An excellent point. And as much as Hamas and Hezbollah have been decimated, I'd like to see the Houthi armament capability go down. Yes, I think we are looking at getting after one of the last big operational legs of Iran's terror mechanism. They really support so many terrorists around the world, always, of course, backed up by China, who buys 90% of Iran's oil and keeps Iran financially in the game.
Dr. Rebecca Grant, thank you for your expertise. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
That's a frightening sight. Deadly storms tearing across the south at this hour after killing at least 17 people in the plains overnight. Fast-moving supercells are forecast from New Orleans north to Birmingham, Alabama, with a very high risk of tornadoes. This monster storm system already has brought tornadoes to Mississippi after twisters killed at least 11 in Missouri and 3 in Arkansas. In Texas, dust storms caused car crashes, killing 3 more. Power cut to hundreds of thousands from Texas all the way up to Michigan. We have Fox team coverage. Meteorologist Adam Klotz is live in the Fox Weather Center with the latest on the storm's path. But first, Fox Weather correspondent Robert Ray, live on the ground in Elliott, Mississippi. Robert.
Yeah, John, good afternoon, and to everyone watching. And you see all the destruction behind me here in Elliott. A tornado came through here about 1 a.m. last night, and the mobile home that I'm standing in front of that was just rocked and destroyed. Gentleman who lived in this home survived. That is his bedroom window behind me. He was taken to the hospital and stitched up. He's got many injuries, and you look around all of this area and the destruction, cars that are on their sides, trees that are uprooted. and we see some of the other images from around Elliott. A very, very tough situation here, and this is just one community that is going through this tornadic outbreak in a very hellacious past few days, as you mentioned, with the dust storms and the rain in California and then in the plains and the mounting toll of deaths, unfortunately. We are nowhere near out of the woods, John. This is just beginning, and it will go long and deep into tonight across the South as all of these storms continue to trek from Mississippi, Alabama, into Georgia, and then up into the mid-Atlantic and parts of the Northeast. We just had a hellacious rainstorm and cells come through this area. Then the sun popped out here in the sky, and that's what we see in situations like this. So we are surrounded by these active thunderstorms and lightning that continue to come by. Thankfully, right now we have a lull, and that allows people to assess some of the damage. But nonetheless, folks need to understand that as we move into the night, tornadoes overnight are very possible, just like last night, the most dangerous kind. National Weather Service is calling this a particularly dangerous situation. That is not very often that they put that out, and this could be one of the largest tornado and severe outbreaks in recent times. John, everybody's got to be safe.
Yeah, Robert, I'm guessing from the way that mobile home is sitting on top of that car that the tornado must have picked up the whole thing while that guy was in his bedroom. Is that right?
That's exactly correct. As he described to us this morning while we were talking to him live on Fox Weather, he said that there was a warm air mass that came in. The windows blew out. The trailer went up in the air, turned on its side, and the explosions of sound around here, he said, were deafening. His hands are cut up, his arm, he's already had stitches, and unfortunately there are other people in this surrounding area that are in critical condition in a hospital in Jackson as I talk right now. We have to pray for them and hope that the outcome will be okay.
Terrible cost, but he's lucky to be alive anyway. Robert Ray. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
For the latest on the path of this storm, let's go to meteorologist Adam Klotz live in the Fox Weather Center. I call it a storm, but it's really a bunch of storms, isn't it, Adam?
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, we've talked about some of the blizzards up in the northern plains, which I won't really get to right now, but it's all part of that entire system. So it's huge. The real target, though, is going to be moving across the southeast today because that is where that particularly dangerous situation is. That is the tornado watch. It's currently Mississippi, it's Alabama, but this is going to march off towards the east, and as it does so, we're going to see those tornado watches continue to grow. That is where the line of storms are right now. The tornado watch means the ingredients are in place. The tornado warning means that it looks like there's a tornado on the ground, and then when you get those purple boxes, these are confirmed tornadoes. These have been long track. So these have been what's running across Mississippi right now. They've been on the ground for a while. Tons of lightning within these. They're rain wrapped, so that means they're going to be difficult to see. Really a dangerous situation. We've been looking at some of the rotation here. That's what this is. When you see a green kind of pushed up against a red, that means that this is spinning. This is spinning air. Those are tornadoes currently on the ground moving across this region. And we're really just getting into maybe the peak hours of this. This is our bullseye. Really look at this big area here in the highest level there. That's a 5 out of 5. We almost never have that. That comes out of the National Weather Service. But that line of storms is starting to move through Mississippi. It's going to lift into Alabama. That is where the most fuel is. That is where we're going to continue to see the most activity. But again, we're seeing it right now. These storms, ultimately, it does weaken a little bit, John. But cities like Atlanta are definitely in the crosshairs. That's not going to happen until maybe midnight or 1. But obviously, there's a long ways to go until then, and we're going to be tracking those storms all along the way.
Yeah, people need to pay attention tonight if they are in the path of that terrible system. Meteorologist Adam Klotz, thanks. Well, the Trump administration continues to push to hold Columbia University accountable for anti-Israel student protests. The Justice Department is investigating whether the school hid illegal immigrants with Homeland Security searching 2 university residences. Meanwhile, protests continue to rage on campus there. CB Cotton is live at Columbia University in New York City. CB.
Hi, John. Well, things have quieted down this weekend, but we know protests could pop up at any moment because protest organizers are still encouraging resistance on social media. So Secretary of State Marco Rubio appeared to sum up the Trump administration's stance on foreign nationals involved in pro-Palestinian protests, writing today on X, quote, "Very simple. President Trump isn't Biden. If you are coming to the U.S. to join pro-terror riots, we will deny deny you a visa. And if you do that after lying your way into our country, we will cancel your visa and send you home. We watched as the Trump administration took steps within the week that ultimately led to the removal of 3 students who the administration says was involved in these ongoing demonstrations. One of them, a doctoral student at Columbia who was from India. This video showing her fleeing the U.S. this week after the feds revoked her student visa. DHS says the video shows her rushing to catch a flight to Canada after self-deporting. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem wrote on X that the student was one of the, quote, Columbia University terrorist sympathizers. Columbia University would only say that it would not comment on individual students. Another student, a Palestinian from the West Bank, was taken into custody by immigration agents this week, according to DHS, which says this student overstayed her student visa. And the agency also says she was arrested during campus protests at Columbia last April. Columbia, though, says it has no record of her being a student. And then we all remember Mahmoud Halil, a green card holder who was arrested last weekend. The State Department is looking to revoke his green card under a rarely used provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Halil was publicly involved in student protest negotiations last year, and the White House alleges he harassed Jewish students and handed out pro-Hamas propaganda. Halil's attorneys are now suing the Trump administration, alleging Halil's rights were violated. But Border Czar Tom Homan says it's a privilege, not a right, to be in this country.
With that privilege comes certain rules. You can't violate law. You can't go out and call for the annihilation of Israel and take over college campus and take over a college building and destroy government property.
So Halil remains at a federal immigration detention facility in Louisiana. He has a hearing on March 27th. John.
And he is generating all kinds of support there at Columbia and other places, CP.
John, most definitely. Yesterday, we saw a protest of about 200 people here outside Columbia's main gates, people calling for him to be released. And then on Thursday, we know people also rallied inside Trump Tower here in Manhattan.
CB Cotton, thanks. And we'll be right back. It's the audio of the 911 call made after the 2022 quadruple murders at the University of Idaho. It comes as the suspect's lawyers hope to take capital punishment off the table in this terrible crime. Madison Scarpino is live with more. Madison.
John, we are now hearing some of the terrifying moments after 4 students were brutally stabbed to death. This call was placed just before noon, several hours after the murder. A warning, some may find this disturbing, but here's how the 911 call starts.
911 location of your emergency.
Something is happening. Something happened in our house. We don't know what.
What is the address of the emergency?
1122.
The phone was passed around to several people during the frantic call. You can hear cries and screams in the background at times, and the operator asked the callers what's going on.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night and she not wake me up.
Okay.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. Yeah.
The operator tells the distraught callers law enforcement and an ambulance are on the way. The call ends once officers arrive at the off-campus house, and that's when they find Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonzalez, and Ethan Chapin dead in their bedrooms. Prosecutors say 28-year-old criminology PhD student Bryan Kohberger killed the young victims. He was allegedly identified through DNA from a knife sheath left at the scene, but Kohberger's attorneys are now saying prosecutors did not disclose evidence on time. And because of this, the defense is asking the judge to take the death penalty off the table for Kohberger. His trial is set to start this August, and it will likely last several weeks. John.
Madison Scarpino. Madison, thanks. Let's bring in Nima Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. So the defense, Kohberger's defense team, is asking that the death penalty be taken off the table based on what you know of their filings. What do you think the chances are?
John, I think the chances are slim, but this is what death penalty lawyers try to do. They try to save their client's life. And we recently saw in another very high-profile Idaho murder case where Lori Vallow, the doomsday cult mom, the death penalty was removed in that case because the prosecution didn't turn over evidence. So what the defense in the Kohberger case is trying to do is file every motion. They're taking a kitchen sink approach because they're not just looking at the trial court and the jurors. They're looking at the mandatory state and federal appeals that follow every death penalty case because their singular goal is to keep Bryan Kohberger off death row.
You think they're grasping at straws here, or they have a case?
I do believe they're grasping at straws. You know, there is the single source DNA that puts Kohberger at the scene. His cell phone appears to travel from Washington State, where he lived, to Idaho, where the murders happened. And of course, the white Hyundai Elantra that really broke this case. So there's a lot of evidence here that points to Bryan Kohberger. And what the defense is trying to do is, again, take that kitchen sink approach, throw everything out there. Maybe an appellate judge down the road will say, you know what, the trial judge made a mistake, and for that reason, we're going to spare Kohberger's life.
You know, when this case first broke, it was more than a month, I think, that before any arrests were made. And people, especially in Idaho, in that community, were saying, what's going on? How come police haven't made an arrest? This is bungled police work. But it turns out they were, they had their eye on Kohberger all this time, and were sort of, trying to do everything they could to make sure that they had an ironclad case against him. It would seem pretty tough for the defense to pick that case apart now.
It is very tough. And like you said, John, it did take approximately a month. And one of the most gruesome murders in Idaho state history. And as a former prosecutor, you would expect there to be a lot more evidence linking the crime scene to Kohberger. But he is one of the most careful criminal defendants I've ever covered in my more than 2 decades of doing this. He is a criminology PhD student. He would wear gloves everywhere he went. He would discard his trash in plastic bags and other folks' trash. And it was only through his father's DNA that they were able to do an IgG analysis and link that DNA on the knife sheath back to
that state police made as he was on his way back to Pennsylvania from where he was living in Idaho. Do you see any, the fact that the state police knew he was a suspect and pulled him over? Do you see any problems there?
No, police can pull folks over. They can ask questions. And you're right. Bryan Kohberger was pulled over with his father as they were traveling from Washington to Pennsylvania. So they had their eyes on him because his cell phone had pinged at or near the home where the murders happened. Not on the night of the murder, because again, he was so savvy and sophisticated, he either turned his phone off or he put it in airplane mode before he got there. So they were eyeing Bryan Kohberger for weeks, and fortunately, they were able to get some discarded food that his father had thrown out. And when that happens, there's no Fourth Amendment protection, and that's how they were able to close the loop on this case.
All right, Nima Rahmani, we appreciate it. Thanks for your expertise. Since American college student Sudiksha Kananki went missing while on spring break in the Dominican Republic, authorities have widened their search and interviewed a witness who was with her shortly before she went missing. Former D.C. homicide detective Ted Williams has been following this case. So has Nate Foy, who is live for us now in Punta Cana. Nate.
Hey, John. So the search continues. Today we've seen helicopters in the air, Dominican Armed Forces here on the beach, and search teams in the water as we are learning more about the man last seen with Sudiksha Kananki, who is now identified as Joshua Reby of Iowa. Now, thanks to our colleague Brian Yanis, we were able to obtain the transcript from an interview that he gave Dominican authorities on Wednesday, and he details meeting Kananki at the Rio Republica Resort, which is just down the beach from where we are right now. And in that nearly 4-hour interview, He talks about how they went swimming in the ocean after drinking at the hotel bar. He said they were kissing in the water when a big wave hit them and brought them out to sea. He says he tried rescuing her. He brought her back to knee-deep water. He asked if she was okay and told investigators, quote, "I didn't hear her response because I started vomiting all the seawater I had swallowed. After vomiting, I looked around and didn't see anyone. I thought she had grabbed her things and left." Now, Reeby refused to answer 8 questions from Dominican authorities based on the advice of his lawyers. His parents say he's fully cooperating with the investigation and that he's been irregularly detained and questioned without a lawyer present. Meanwhile, the search for Kananke continues with 300 agents in the water and on land. And in this new video, you see they're using drones with artificial intelligence to detect objects in the water. Now, Dominican authorities are considering all possibilities. I mentioned how Reeby's parents say that he's been questioned without a lawyer present. We know that the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office detectives who were here in the Dominican Republic but have since gone back to the United States interviewed him as well on Thursday. His father and lawyer were present for that round of questioning. We'll send it back to you, John.
All right, Nate Foy. Nate, thanks. For more on this case, let's bring in Ted Williams, a former D.C. homicide detective and a Fox News contributor. Ted, you have said that you think Siddiqua could still be alive.
John, I have said that I think that Siddiqua could very well be alive. Well, the authorities here, I think, rushed to judgment at the beginning of this investigation where they said that she accidentally drowned. And there was nothing to actually show that she, quote unquote, accidentally drowned. So they've had to walk that back, the authorities here. Now they've widened the investigation. They've got Interpol involved in the investigation. And they're also at this stage looking to see if there's foul play.
It sounds like it was a horrible night to be on vacation in the Dominican Republic. The resort, this 5-star resort where she was staying.